Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League was released with great excitement as the long-awaited production of Rocksteady Studios. The fight against the Justice League members with beloved anti-heroes such as Harley Quinn, Deadshot, Captain Boomerang, and King Shark offered an intriguing story. The game, set in the open world of Metropolis, was designed to be played alone or with friends. However, despite the game's entertaining story and magnificent presentation, it received serious criticism in terms of gameplay. Repetitive mission designs and shallow loot shooter mechanics caused the game to quickly become monotonous. In addition, the live service model and microtransaction systems drew the ire of many players. As a game carrying the legacy of the Batman Arkham series, the production, which failed to meet the expectations of fans, became one of the most controversial games of the year. Concord was a project developed by Firewalk Studios for many years and attracted attention with its big budget. However, when the game was released, it was a disappointment and became known as one of the biggest failures in the industry. Its lack of innovation, uninteresting character designs, and weak marketing strategy prevented the game from standing out. The game, which could not find a place for itself in the intense competition in the hero shooter genre, quickly fell into obscurity with the decrease in the number of players and sales figures that were far below expectations. Although technically flawless, its inability to present a creative identity caused Concord to be withdrawn from the market in a short time. This failure once again revealed the risks of big-budget projects in the gaming world.
Make way!
Okay, very nice, guys. I know you're hiding something, Cal, and we're gonna find out what it is.
South Park Snow Day was eagerly awaited by fans of the popular animated series, but the result was a complete disappointment. The game received harsh reviews from critics and players, offering a boring experience when played alone and providing limited entertainment even in multiplayer mode. Technical issues, lack of story depth, and weak writing were among the most criticized aspects of the game. In addition, the inadequacy of the gameplay mechanics and the repetitive structure failed to reflect South Park's unique humor and dynamism. The mediocre graphics and lack of detail in the environmental design also weakened the game's atmosphere. This production, which fans had high hopes for, fell far behind the previous successful games of the series. With all these problems, South Park Snow Day took its place among the most criticized productions of this year and will continue to be remembered as a disappointment that will be talked about for a long time.
Get through them!
Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection attracted attention by promising nostalgia for fans of the series, but the result was a complete disappointment. This compilation, which brought together the first two games, was plagued with technical issues and drew criticism from players. Server problems and frequent crashes in multiplayer modes greatly affected the experience. Visual and audio inconsistencies failed to provide a sense of atmosphere, and there was no innovation that was up to today's standards. Critics heavily criticized the fact that this version offered no additional content or improvements compared to the original games. The low Metacritic score and fan disappointment made the game one of the most criticized games of the year. Developed by Red Thread Games, Dustborn attracted attention with its action-adventure story set in an alternative America. Players promised an interesting experience with the choices that shaped the story as they joined a group of superpowered characters in their fight against an oppressive regime. Although it took a different approach with its comic book-style visuals and dialogue-driven narrative, the game's gameplay mechanics were subject to much criticism. Its poorly paced structure and repetitive mission designs made it difficult for players to fully connect with the story. While the visual presentation was appealing, the lack of character depth and the mechanics overshadowing the story were a great disappointment. Despite its interesting ideas, Dustborn became one of the most controversial games of this year due to the problems in its implementation. Skull and Bones was released with great anticipation as a pirate-themed action-adventure game that had been in development for many years. However, the game received serious backlash from both critics and players. Its repetitive mission structure, lack of depth of gameplay, and limited content were cited as the weakest aspects of the game. Technical issues, optimization problems, and frequent crashes negatively affected the player experience. In addition, the atmosphere and graphics were not impressive enough, causing many players to disconnect from the game. The limited free movement feeling and the lack of a real pirate experience led Ubisoft to fail to achieve the success it expected from this project. All these problems made Skull and Bones one of the biggest disappointments of this year and took its place in the gaming world as a failure that will be talked about for a long time. Unknown Ninth Awakening was released with great anticipation as an action-adventure game set in 20th century India and adorned with supernatural elements. The main character Haruna's encounter with an interdimensional power called the Fold, and confronting the past using this power were among the elements that deepened the story. However, the game's gameplay mechanics and pace failed to create the expected effect. Although mechanics such as puzzle solving and environmental manipulation had potential, the limited sense of discovery and the repetitiveness of mission designs were disappointing for players. The lack of atmospheric details and the story's reliance on cliches overshadowed the game's promising potential. Although Unknown 9 Awakening had interesting ideas, it was among this year's controversial productions due to problems in implementation. Silent Hill: The Short Message was eagerly awaited by fans of the series, but its release was a complete disappointment. The game's lack of depth and limited environmental interactions were among the most frequently mentioned problems by critics and players. While the horror elements were insufficient to bring the classic atmosphere of the series to life, the puzzles were simple and predictable, which negatively affected the game's immersion. Technical problems and inconsistencies in the graphics were other factors that overshadowed the experience. The atmosphere that could not create the expected tension and the lack of innovation caused the game to fall far behind when compared to other productions in the series. All these reasons made Silent Hill: The Short Message one of the most criticized games of this year.
Maya?
Jujutsu Kaisen Cursed Clash aimed to attract a large fan base by bringing the beloved manganeme series to the arena fighting genre. It aimed to bring the dynamics of the anime world to life with 2 versus 2 fights and familiar characters from the series. However, the game's shallow and unbalanced gameplay was a great disappointment for players. The story mode was created by simply adding anime scenes, revealing its lack of depth. Performance issues in the online experience and mediocre visuals were also among the criticized aspects of the game. The inadequacy of the fighting mechanics and the fact that it did not meet expectations caused the game to lose popularity quickly among fans. Despite starting with a good idea, Jujutsu Kaisen Cursed Clash became one of the most criticized games of this year due to its inadequate implementation.
Get it together. Right side.
You really underestimated.
Life is Strange Double Exposure was released with great anticipation as a sequel to the series. The game, which aimed to add a different dimension to its story with the theme of parallel universes and new powers, unfortunately received mixed reviews. The mechanics of switching between parallel universes provided a confusing experience for some players, while the pace and emotional depth of the story were found to be insufficient compared to previous games. Technical problems and inconsistencies in dialogue prevented players from fully connecting to the story. However, the visual design and character animations were praised, especially the details and facial expressions strengthened the atmosphere of the game. However, all these contradictions weakened Life is Strange Double Exposure's potential to continue the legacy of the series and caused it to become a production that divided fans in two.